Today we're going to be talking about something very interesting idea in the Torah. It's well known that the Torah is not always written in order. Now, in Sefer Bamidbar, there's an interesting Parshat in Beha'alotcha. So in Beha'alotcha, there's somewhere in the middle of that Parsha, the Torah kind of goes back in time. So let's point it out. Let's show you how that works exactly. If we look at the beginning of the Sefer of Bamidbar, when the book of Bamidbar starts, so it starts with an opening verse to the entire book that says that Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe, and God spoke to Moshe Bamidbar Sinai, in the desert of Sinai, in the Sinai desert, in the tent of meeting, Be'ol Moed, Be'echad lachodesh hasheni, on the first day of the second month. Again, Nisan is the first month, Iyar the second. So it was Rosh Chodesh Iyar. In the first day of the second month, Bashana Hashenit, on the second year, L'tzeitam me'eretz Mitzrayim, from when they left Egypt, and to give over these things that they're gonna talk about. Now, but we're not gonna get into the details of, obviously they counted the Jewish people there, but that's not really what we're gonna focus on. We're gonna now jump to Beha'alotcha. In the third Aliyah, it has a very similar opening verse. We'll read it slowly so we can try to figure out exactly where it's different. Here it reads, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe Bamidbar Sinai, that God spoke to Moshe in the Sinai desert, Bashana Hashenit, again in the second year, L'tzeitam me'eretz Mitzrayim, from their leaving Egypt. B'chodesh harishon, this is on the first month, Lemor. So what's different? Clearly, the book of Bamidbar starts off on the second year, but in the second month. Further on in the story, we go back to the first month of the second year. So it's a month earlier. We're going back a month. And the commentators really talk about why does the Torah go out of order. This is found in the Gemara, in Midrash, the Sifri actually, which is a Tanaic source, but it's not exactly the Gemara, but it's the Midrash Chazal. So the Sifri asks a question on this. But there's also a klal from the Gemara that, that there's no real order. En mukdam or me'uchar b'Torah. There's really no rule that the Torah has to be in chronological order. There are times when it's out of chronological order, and here's a case of it. Now, most agree that if it's going to be out of order, there needs to be a reason. Because really, we should follow a general order. It's a sensible way to tell a story from beginning to end. Why should I jump forward to then jump backwards? So something should warrant a switch like that. And here too, that's what the Sifri deals with, is trying to address why the Torah changes order. So let's look at the Sifri. Rashi brings us the Sifri, so we don't have to go looking for it. But Rashi brings it on the spot. So let's look at the Sifri, and then hopefully we'll make sense out of all this. The Sifri reads like this: Parsha sheberosh hasefer lo nemra ad iyar. The story talked about in the beginning of the book of Bamidbar didn't happen until Iyar, which is again the second month of the year. From there, we learn that there's no real order in the Torah. And that's there's no real seder, there's no real order. But now they're going to ask, why didn't the book of Bamidbar start with this story, which happens on Rosh Chodesh Nisan? Why not? So it answers, Mipnei shehu ginutan shel Yisrael, because this parsha that tells us about Rosh Chodesh Nisan is very embarrassing to the Jewish people. The story comes out that it will embarrass us, and therefore, so Hashem did not want to start the book of Bamidbar with something that would embarrass us. Okay, now, what was so embarrassing? So we continue. Shekol 40 shana shayu Yisrael Bamidbar, because for the entire 40-year period that the Jews were in the desert, Lo hikrivu ela Pesach ze bilvad. The Jews only brought up one korban Pesach. So what comes out is, if we do a little bit of historical clarification, when the Jews were in Egypt, before they left, right? So God came to them on the 10th of Nisan and said, you should all take a seh, take a sheep or goat, I believe, and prepare it to be a korban Pesach. And of course that made a lot of trouble because when they went to buy these animals, the Egyptians asked, what are you buying it for? And they said boldly to their hosting, the people that were taking advantage of them till now, We're taking it to sacrifice to our God. Now, in Egypt, they worshipped these animals, so it was a big test for the Jewish people, and it was a big thing it made. So that's the 10th, and of course, on the 14th, before Pesach, the 15th was when we left. So on the eve of the 14th, everybody ate the Pesach offering. We slaughtered it on the 14th, and we ate it the night of the 15th. And in the morning of the 15th of Nisan, we all left Egypt. So the first Korban Pesach took place in Egypt. Now, what was the plan? So the Torah actually writes that when we go to Israel, we should continue doing this idea of sacrificing a Pesach offering and having it on Pesach. But it specifically mentions when we go to Israel. The Gemara talks about it in Kiddushin. So now, what was the original plan? We were supposed to go to Har Sinai and get a Torah. Now, if we had not sinned with the golden calf, we would have been in Israel way, way, way before the next Pesach would have come about. We would have been in Israel, and we would have done Korban Pesach in Israel. So that's fine. The Torah took care of that. But after the sin of the golden calf, we stuck around in the desert, and really the next year rolled around, came Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which is again, would be a year, almost a full year from when we left Egypt. And Hashem tells Moshe, go and tell the Jewish people that they should start getting ready to do the Korban Pesach in the desert. And he does, and they do it. There's a whole arichos here, the story, there were some people that were contaminated and were not able to do Korban Pesach, and they felt left out. So they went to Moshe and said, Moshe, why should we be lacking? Why should we be left out? Everyone else got to do it. So Moshe said, let me ask Hashem what he says. And Hashem comes back and says, Hashem said, you can also do it. And from there, coming forward, there's a whole new Parsha in the Torah called Pesach Sheni, meaning Hashem said, you can make up the Korban Pesach a month from Pesach. You can now come and do this Pesach Sheni. And that's all talked about over here. And now, interestingly, how does the story end? So at this point also, the Jews should have still been in Israel the next year. But instead of coming to Israel the next year, we all know the unfortunate ending when the spies went to spy out the land. They came back and spoke bad about the land. And it was decreed on all of Klal Yisrael to remain in the desert for 40 years total. Now, so the third year from when they left Egypt, meaning the second year that they were in the desert, so let's put ourselves in their place. What do you think happened when the third year came? So remember, they did Korban Pesach in Egypt. They also did Korban Pesach in the desert a year before, because Moshe told them to do it. The actual Torah itself says you should do it when you get to Israel. So a third year rolled around. It was the third year, and what do you think they did? Did Moshe tell them to do it? Did they figure out on their own that they should do it? None of this happened. And the rabbis explained to us, from the Sifrei, that there was no Korban Pesach in that third year, and that turns out to be a very embarrassing thing for the Jewish people. Very embarrassing. So the next 30 some odd years, there were no Korbanot. And when did we begin again to do Korban Pesach? Only much, much later in Israel. And so what happens is that the story of the Korban Pesach becomes an element of embarrassment for us. It's something that the Torah does not want to say in the beginning of the book of Bamidbar. Now let's just appreciate the beginning of, we spoke before, the beginning of each book talks about something very positive. It wants to show how beautiful the Jewish people are, how great we are, how much Hashem loves us, and the special relationship between us and Hashem. So consistent with all of that, the Torah would have liked to start a story that's going to show us in a positive light. And since Korban Pesach ultimately shows us in a negative light, it was pushed off, and we have something else in the beginning of Bamidbar. But let's explore an interesting idea here. What the Sifri is actually telling us is that in an ideal sense, it would have been better to start off this whole Parsha with the Parsha of Korban Pesach. So let's appreciate what makes Korban Pesach so special. So one could explain like this. After so many years of trouble and suffering in Egypt, and unfortunately for good reason, of course, but God was seemingly, obviously only externally, nowhere to be found. We didn't get the help from him that we would have really, from our limited perspective, would have wanted. Instead, we suffered. Children were thrown in the ocean, in the Nile River, and we were persecuted and terribly by the Egyptians. Then Hashem comes and says, okay, I didn't forget my people, and I'm here to help you and to take you out. things get worse. So it's not such a simple story. It's not such a, there are a lot of challenges for the Jewish people in Egypt. And what do? Hashem says, now I want you to take an animal that your Egyptian hosts idolize, worship, putting you in danger, but take it and tell them what you're doing, and then you're gonna sacrifice it, and then I'm gonna come and take you out. We fearlessly and with tremendous faith in Hashem stood to that test, and we did that. So based on this, I would like to explain that really the Korban Pesach represents the beautiful trust that the Jewish people had in Hashem, and the self-sacrifice. We risked our lives. We risked our lives challenging the Egyptians, which were, physically stronger than us, even though God was doing miracles. But we, at that point, had not yet stood up to defend ourselves once with our own physical strength. So here we were taking a big risk, going against the Egyptians, which were much more powerful than us, in their face, flaunting the fact that we're going to sacrifice an animal that they idolize. That, I think, tells really the essence of the story of the Jewish people and the relationship between us and Hashem, and how devoted we were to Him and how we risked our lives, as I mentioned. And for that reason, that is an unbelievable Parsha to begin the story of Bamidbar, the book of Bamidbar. And how our whole following in the desert, and how He took care of us in the desert. And that would have been ideal. But because, unfortunately, come year 3, we didn't do it, and we didn't do it again until much, much later. So now all of a sudden it represents something very embarrassing about the Jewish people, so it's left out. So now let us appreciate what's so embarrassing about it. According to the commentators, it really comes out that there was no real command to do the Korban Pesach in the desert. The command was to do it in Egypt, and then to continue doing it in Israel. And it was in the desert, there was no command officially. And that is why Hashem Himself came to tell us, in this second year, I want you to do it. Now, some explain that on the 3rd year, there still was no command to do it. So really, we weren't really guilty of not doing anything. So the question is, what's really so bad? What was so embarrassing? What did Hashem really expect from us? If He didn't tell us to do it, we weren't commanded to do it. So why is it embarrassing? So what I'd like to explain is like this. Really, what do we find in the 2nd year? We find that Hashem came and said to do Korban Pesach. And we did. There was a small group of people that didn't do it. What did they do in response? They said that we feel missing. We can't live without the Korban Pesach. We want to do the Korban Pesach. So they came to Moshe and asked, can we do it? We want to do it. And he asked Hashem, and what did Hashem answer? Yes. Now, here we see something very unique that is not necessarily something that we would assume is part of a relationship between a king and his people. Meaning, really, a king is the boss, and we do what the king says. Maybe it's not so appropriate to come to the melech and tell him what you want to do. King, I'm here to volunteer. I would like to do this job. No, the king will tell you what to do. But Hashem is not only our king. Hashem is, of course, also our loving Father. So the fact that Hashem is a loving Father, so there's another aspect of how we can serve Him and how we can draw close to Him. Let's say a child understands that a father had a long day at work and he would love a tea. So the child can take initiative and go make him a tea. And when you make it and he brings it, he's going to be very happy that you thought of me and you made with love this cup of tea. So here too, as the fact that God's our Father, then we are taught in this Pesach Sheni, the fact that the second group came forward asking and received. So that should have been a lesson to all of us that, you know what? Even though that Moshe didn't come to tell us to do the Korban, let us learn from the people from the year before that went and asked. So let us all come together and ask, can we do Korban Pesach? And certainly the answer would have been yes. So it could be when the Sifri are telling us that it's an embarrassment for the Jewish people. So let's really work out how the embarrassment unfolds. First of all, that group that came forward already, from their own experience, should have realized, wait, let's come forward again. But they didn't. So that's very embarrassing. Because they already showed last year how desperately they wanted to do it and how devoted they were, and they didn't do it. And they didn't come forward the next year. So the big question is, what stopped them? Why did they not think to come forward the second year? So we could say, it's a little bit of a negative lesson, but I think we need to learn these lessons as well, because ultimately the Torah is going to teach us how to make ourselves better. So it could be this. If you look at the actual wording of the Pasuk, it says, why should we be lacking amongst the people? Meaning, when they saw everyone else do it, they felt lacking. And that's actually it's a good thing. The rabbis tell us that to be jealous of people that are learning Torah and advancing in Torah is good because it'll push you to advance in Torah as well. Kinat sofrim tarbeh chokhmah. That jealousy of the learning of Torah will increase your Torah learning eventually. But let's appreciate, what did the rabbis have in mind when they said that to be jealous of your chavrusa because he's learning better than you and he learns more than you? Is that the ultimate? That's ultimately why we should learn Torah? No. It's going to help you progress, but you have to outgrow that eventually. Really, you have to reach a point where you don't rely on the just because everyone else has it, everyone else is doing it, so then I feel like I need to have it, I need to be doing it. And ultimately, this group of people, even in the next year, so when no one did Korban Pesach, they could have brought their desire to another level. They could have came forward because they felt lacking without being in comparison to everybody else. And that was really what they were meant, so to speak, according to this approach, to do. Meaning that since they didn't come forward the second year, it was embarrassing to them, because if they really missed the Korban Pesach so much and they really had a strong desire to do it, then they should have come forward the second year. But now, why should it be an embarrassment for all of the Jews? According to what I've just explained now, we can appreciate why that small group of Jews should be embarrassed. But what about everyone else? They didn't come forward the first year. So here I think we have a powerful insight into really the whole dynamic of the Jewish people. How really we are individuals, we all have different twists on things and different attitudes and different ideas. And ultimately, like a rainbow has all these colors and together the rainbow is so beautiful. We also, the Jewish people, are meant to look at each other's positive traits and even negative traits, and we should use all of this to help us become better. So in that second year, when that small group of Jews came forward and said, we want to do Korban Pesach, so the embarrassment is on the greater part of the Jewish people that next year, when the next year rolled around, so we're going to ask on them, why didn't you learn from the first group? Why didn't you learn from that group in the first year? You saw that they came forward and you ignored it. You didn't let that be a lesson to you. Meaning the Jews didn't learn from each other enough how to become better. You know, the first year they were embarrassed, they felt lacking because they did it. Well, in the second year, the taina on them is you should have remembered what happened last year and learned from it. And that could be one way to appreciate a little bit in depth why this Parsha is so embarrassing. So just to repeat, so we have it all clear. On the simplest of levels, you know, the fact that Hashem himself came and told us to do it in the second year, so clearly Hashem stood back and waited to see how we would react. And maybe on an ultimate level, we should have come forward. You're going to ask, but why should we have an obligation to come forward? If Hashem doesn't say to do something, we don't have to do it. So the answer is, well, the year before, that's exactly what happened. There were Jews that were contaminated, and they asked to do it, and they were given a chance to do it. So you see, they should have come forward the next year. And if the second group, seeing this, experiencing it, witnessing it, should have also taken it to heart and come forward the next year. And that's why this becomes embarrassing to the Jewish people. With this entire explanation that we have here, we can actually answer a very big question brought from the Ramban. The Ramban explores all of this, and in the end, comes off with a very big question. He says, if God wanted them to do the Korban Pesach in the third year, then why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu come forward and tell them to do it? And he leaves it there as a question. I saw this answer in one of the Sichot from the Lubavitch Rabbi. He answers this question in a very nice way. And the answer he essentially gives is this. Since, you know, he doesn't mention the other things, you know, so to speak, you know, exactly the way I'm presenting them here, but the answer still applies. Essentially, if God wanted to see what we're made of, so to speak, he said, now it's on you. I want it to come from you. Nobody wants a one-way relationship. You know, a husband or wife doesn't want to be the only one that's pushing to make the marriage work. You want to see that someone else cares that the marriage should work. So here too, Hashem said, now I'm going to step back. I went out of my way to show you that I still love you and to show you that you're still precious to me. Now let's see what you're made of. And we did nothing. And so what would have happened? Let's say Moshe Rabbeinu would have came and told us to do it. What would it have solved? If the whole point was that Hashem wanted to see that it should come from our own initiative, then him telling us to do it would only make things worse. For example, a husband and wife are having trouble. So if the husband is, let's say he's been not giving his wife enough attention, not showing how special and precious she is, and so what happens is a friend comes and reminds him, you know, you're really not treating your wife right. You should do something special. And because of that, he takes her and out and they do something special. So that's very nice. But if he lets his wife know, or his wife understands that the only reason why he did it is because the friend told him to do it, is that going to make things better or worse? It's not going to make things really better. When we do things for Hashem, we have to do them from the heart, we have to do them sincerely, and so you see, that wouldn't have helped. For Moshe Rabbeinu to tell us to do something that was meant to come from our heart and with sincerity and from our own initiative, so it would have accomplished nothing. With this, we can appreciate really now why it's such an embarrassment, and of course the solution. The solution is a few things we talked about. One is that we should look to each other and learn from each other. Try to let my friend be someone that I can look at, that will inspire me to be better. That's only step one. Step two is ultimately, it's about me and Hashem. When I do for Hashem, it shouldn't be motivated because someone else is also doing. It should ultimately be just because I want to be with Hashem and close to Hashem. May we succeed in mamish, doing Ratzon Hashem, b'shleimut, and may we merit with all of our hard work the final Korban Pesach. We should get back again with the Beit HaMikdash HaShlishi b'meira b'yameinu.